Hi, everyone, and welcome back to week 6 of our food advocacy course. Again, I'm Courtney Trey Montana here with you from Hartford Community Action Agency. And for our last week, week 6, we are going to kind of gather all the information that we've learned throughout the past 6 weeks and put it together for one last lesson. So pulling from all the lessons that we've talked about all week long. So welcome to week 6, and it's called Be a Thrifty and Educated Shopper. So let's talk about what does that mean. So before we even get into a grocery store to make purchases of the food and beverages and items we need, there are a lot of things that we should be doing prior to stepping foot in. And I kind of compare it to if you're taking a road trip, most likely or hopefully you're going to have looked at a map and know where you're going. And this is the same way for being in a store. You need a roadmap. You need a plan. So this is a big portion of your budget. We want to make sure that you're spending it well and thinking about what you're buying. So first, let's talk about some tips. Looking at flyers and coupons before you go to the store. So find out what is on sale and base what you're going to purchase based on what is on sale. So for example, if you thought this week you were going to make a chicken dish, but there is no chicken on sale, maybe you're looking for an alternative protein, something else that is on sale. So rethinking your plan if needed. Definitely have that store loyalty card for maximum savings. So I know one time I've been in, for example, a pharmacy where I did not have the card, didn't pay attention, thought I was getting a sale and ended up paying twice as much. So making sure you have that loyalty card for the stores that you frequently shop. Again, as I said, having a map, have a plan, have a list, and have a budget. It's very important. You want to know what you are going to buy specifically, and you also need to know how much do you have to spend in the store. It's very important to think that out and keep track of it as you're going throughout the store. Another thing that people don't often think about is how we feel when we go to a store, when we go shopping, and how that can impact what we buy. Now, is it always likely that we're going to be in a great mood, no stress when we go to the store, without, younger children and things like that? No, in a perfect world, we would love that to happen, to go alone, to be in a great spirit. However, at least try to be mindful of how you're feeling. So trying not to go to the store hungry or tired. So when you're hungry or tired, it can encourage impulse buying. It's kind of like fight or flight. And this can become a really bad habit and also a budget breaker. So you're just throwing things into your cart and not paying any attention. And this can definitely become a bad habit. So at least being mindful of how you feel. Choosing meals with fewer ingredients. So I always say, keep it simple. Thinking of things, for example, maybe like a pasta dish where you're going to have a simple sauce, some whole wheat noodles, maybe you have a chicken or a protein, but not having, a large list of things that you're not going to use or reuse. For example, I always say you look up these recipes on websites and you find these spices that you might never use again, and they're, $7.99, $8.99. Try to keep it simple. That's going to help you save. Buying items that can be reused and repurposed throughout the week. So not necessarily leftovers per se, but making something that you can use differently throughout the week. So for example, in my household, we typically will make a big pot of spaghetti sauce, possibly on a weekend when I have a little more time. And then throughout the week with that pot of sauce, we might have it with whole wheat noodles. We might make our own homemade pizza. We might make a pasta casserole like a lasagna or a ziti, or sometimes we have it over vegetables. So making one big item that you can use and reuse throughout the week. So it's not like you're eating leftovers, the same meal day after day, but you're repurposing and reusing it. Again, as we talked about throughout the weeks, buying fresh produce is great and we want to have as much of that as possible, but being mindful that we want to buy it in season, that we want to have frozen next, and that we want to keep our canned on hand. So using all 3 varieties in that order in order to save money, but also to have nutritional items in our daily diet. So including those produce items. When we're in a store, thinking about purchasing store brands where possible. So I realized, we all have our items that we want to have name brand. I don't know, it could be a cereal, for example. Maybe there's something you absolutely cannot buy store brand. It's the way you were raised, it's what you like. That's fine. However, expand when you're thinking about other purchases maybe then. So maybe you don't buy your cereal as a store brand, but maybe when you're buying your whole grain items like your noodles or your rice. So looking at store brands to save money. Some other tips, and we're going to talk about the protein group later today, but when we are thinking about protein, rethinking meat as the center of the meal. So meat can often be a big part of our budget when we're shopping, and we don't need it as often as I think that we believe we do. So, I always talk about how when I was growing up, the center of my meal for dinner was often the meat, and we might have little sides of, potatoes or vegetables. However, the meat was the center. Well, my plate's telling us that we want half of our plate to be fruits and vegetables. So obviously the meat is not going to be the center of the protein. But thinking about buying alternative sources of protein, like some beans, eggs, and also some seafood twice a week if you can. So thinking outside of the box, rethinking that meat. Also, when it comes to beverages, and we talked about beverages and how purchasing beverages such as sodas and sports drinks and items like that can add unnecessary calories and also unnecessary dollars to your grocery bill. In a perfect world, all we actually need to drink is really water. Are we going to do that all the time? No, it is nice to have some other things, but thinking if you're going to cut your budget and you also want to have a more balanced diet and include, healthy habits in your routine, drinking water and trying to stick to tap water if you have clean, healthy tap water, because bottled water gets expensive too. And obviously the bottles in our environment is not ideal, but trying to drink tap water. Purchase a water bottle that you can reuse over and over again. Also, keeping in mind unit price comparisons for similar items. So we did a lesson on that, but realizing that there are actually two prices when we purchase items in the store. There are unit price and retail price. And with looking at unit price, we can actually realize what we are paying for what we are getting. The actual food item, not just the packaging, not how it looks, but what we are going to consume. So looking at unit price. So as I said, today, the last food group we are going to discuss is going to be the protein food group in my plate. And so what we want to focus on is trying to vary our protein routine. So yes, having meat, poultry, seafood, and eggs, always good, but also think of some of those plant-based proteins like your beans, your peas, your soy products, nuts, and seeds if you can. We do need protein. However, it's been proven that Americans do have plenty of protein in their diet for the most part, and that we eat more than we truly need. So being mindful of varying that routine and that we probably don't need as much as we are currently consuming. So here's a list of 10 tips, as we always try to include with my plate. Again, number one, varying your protein choices and trying to eat seafood. Twice a week is number two. If you're going to eat meat, selecting lean meat and poultry. Number four is always a great one. So eggs, as long as you don't have high cholesterol, is a great source of protein and also can be an inexpensive option. And it's also a great way that you can add variety to your diet. So having an omelet, including vegetables with it, or having an egg in your salad, for example, in a green salad, hard-boiled eggs. Again, 5, eating plant protein foods more often. So trying to include those beans in your diet. So they're going to be lower in fat typically and also higher in fiber. Consider nuts and seeds. So unsalted preferably, but topping your salad with some nuts or seeds, or portioning them out in snack bags, because we want to be mindful of the calories, but they are a good source of protein. When you're making your meat, thinking about how you're preparing it. So maybe try grilling or roasting or broiling, baking, rather than frying. And we can eat things such as sandwiches. We just want to be mindful if we're having lunch meat, that they are high in fat and sodium. So maybe focusing on things like tuna or salmon or peanut butter. Again, we do not, number 9, we do not need as much protein as we think we do. So figuring out what for you based on, your makeup, your build and all that, what you require for each day. And as I mentioned, especially with beans, if they're going to be canned and also meats, we want to make sure that we're looking at the sodium levels so they can be packaged and have a lot of sodium. So being mindful of that. So what items are in the protein group? So they're mainly listed here. So you have meat, poultry, seafood, beans, peas, eggs, soy products, nuts, and seeds. And again, we want to be mindful of eating only what we need and trying to include seafood options as well. So just again, some of those tips that we shared earlier. And here's a list of some of those items that do fall under the category. So I won't read them, but you can look over them at your leisure. So moving on, one of the great ways that I like to have alternative dinners or meals that may not contain protein is by using my Crockpot and actually making soups. And so one of my favorite soups to make, especially in the summertime, is going to be a Crockpot veggie soup. So if you wanted, you could always add some protein to it, but I like to stick to the plant-based, so mainly beans and veggies. So I'd like for you to come along as we make a Crockpot veggie soup in my kitchen. Let's go.
Hi everyone, this is Courtney and I'm back from Hartford Community Action Agency. And today for our 6th week and 6th lesson, we're going to talk about the protein food group. And just to reiterate about my plate tells us that we know now that half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables, a quarter green, half of them being whole grains, and then a quarter protein, which is what we're going to talk about today. So in the protein group are your typical meats that you would consider, which could be beef, poultry, pork, seafood. However, today we're going to talk about other forms of protein. So for example, sometimes we forget that beans can be a source of protein, and also other items like seeds and nuts. So we're back, and today my special guest is my husband. This is my husband, Dave. And Dave is an excellent cook. He knows his way around the kitchen. Normally, for his day job, he is a public school teacher. He's been with Hartford County Public Schools for about 24 years, right? 24 years at Happy Grace High School. He's an excellent husband. He's a wonderful father, and he's also a great teacher. And he's also a really great cook. So he's going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to make today.
For our vegetable soup, we're going to use the following ingredients. We're going to use vegetable soup broth, we're going to use cannellini beans, we're going to use some tomato paste, and then later on we're going to use some quinoa. When you're making the soup in the crock pot, we want to make sure we put the crock pot on high, and then we're going to combine all the ingredients. Remember, when you add the beans, you want to make sure you drain them first. Remember, before you cook, always wash your hands with soap and water for 20 seconds. Also for this recipe, we're going to use some fresh vegetables. We picked up these vegetables in a vegetable box from a local farm, and I'm going to introduce to you what they are. First we have kale, next we have zucchini squash, then we have a summer squash, we're going to use half of a red onion, and we're also going to use some mushrooms. When you're using fresh vegetables, make sure that you wash it in lukewarm water. Once your broth is nice and hot, the first thing that you're going to do is roughly cut up some kale. Next, we're going to cut up our zucchini and our summer squash into slices. Remember to hold back your fingers so you don't cut yourself. Next, we're going to finely dice half of a red onion. Lastly, we're going to chop up some mushrooms.
As you can see, this is starting to become a beautiful, colorful summer soup.
Lastly, once your soup starts to boil, we're going to add a half a cup of dried quinoa. If you don't want to use quinoa, you could also use brown rice or noodles.
So we're going to allow the soup to simmer inside the crock pot on high for about 2 hours or so. You can judge. Probably the most expensive thing about this recipe is actually getting the crock pot. So you can purchase a crock pot at any major store for about $24. There are a variety of sizes and kinds. I like this one because you can actually travel with it so the lid closes. But once you make that purchase up front, then you can use it throughout the year for soups and for things like this. Thank you for being here with us today as we talked about the protein group, and my husband Dave showed us how to make a really yummy bean and vegetable soup in a crock pot. And until next time, be well.
And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the making of our Crockpot veggie soup. I'd also like to know, when you make the soup, it's perfectly fine to make it on a stove, in a pot. The nice thing about a Crockpot is that you can kind of just leave it and do what you need to do, whereas on the stove, you're going to have to tend to it. But you can definitely make this just the same ingredients right on your stove top. So moving on. One of the last things I always like to do is I like to tie in a book reading for those of us that have children, and I feel like it's a great way to share the lesson in a way that they might understand. So I hope you enjoy the reading of this book called The Beastly Feast.
Morning! So today's book that we're reading is called The Beastly Feast by Bruce Goldstone and illustrated by Blair Lent. Alright, so when I read this book, I want you guys to really listen to the words, okay? Because we're going to be learning about rhyming words. And rhyming words are two or more words that have the same or similar ending. I'll give you an example. Goat, moat, coat, float. Do you hear the ending sound? They sound the same, right? Okay, so let's start and listen to the words. The Beastly Feast. The beasts are having a feast. Animals from everywhere come with tasty food to share. The beasts are having a feast. Bears bring pears. Parrots bring carrots. Antelope bring cantaloupe. Puffins bring muffins. Mosquitoes bring burritos. Fishes bring knishes. Bees bring tea and bunnies bring honey. Moose bring juice and mice bring rice. Fleas bring peas and flies bring pies. Bunnies, bears, bees, and antelope, honey, pears, tea, and cantaloupe. Mosquitoes, moose, mice, and parrots, burritos, juice, rice, and carrots. Fleas, flies, fishes, and puffins, peas, pies, knishes, and muffins. Burritos, mosquitoes, antelope and fleas, fishes and kishes, cantaloupe and peas. Moose, juice, flies and mice, muffins, puffins, pies, and rice. Teas, bees, bunnies, and pears, parrots, carrots, honeys, and bears. The feast is done, the beasts are full, so everybody claps. Then armadillos bring some pillows. And everybody naps. Okay, so did you hear some of the words that rhyme? Like bunnies and honeys, and antelope and cantaloupe, and flies and pies. All right, hope you enjoyed it. Bye.
And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the book reading of The Beastly Feast. So moving on, included in your packet of paperwork is going to be this list of Crockpot recipe websites. So you can click on them and find some other tasty recipes to make in a Crockpot or to make on your stove. And since this is coming to the end of our 6 weeks together, a couple of things. First of all, those of you who completed all 6 weeks, each of the 6 lessons, and submitted all the proper paperwork, you will be put in for a drawing for a Crockpot, and I will be reaching out to you shortly to let you know who won that. So that's pretty exciting. And finally, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me for the past 6 weeks. I hope you took away at least a couple lessons on how to possibly include some healthier habits with your eating, and then also some ways that you can do that on your budget. So it is possible, and I hope that you learned some things the past 6 weeks. Thanks again, take care, and be well.